1 year after my wife Catherine passed away, I finally decided to open the office she kept locked for decades. I hired a contractor to renovate it into a charity library, something she had quietly planned before she died. But as I stood at her memorial, my phone rang. The contractor sounded terrified. He told me not to come alone. He said I had to bring both of my sons, no exceptions. When the three of us arrived and the wall came down, I understood why Catherine insisted on all of us being there. What was hidden behind that wall wasn't meant to be discovered alone. Before we continue, take a second to support the channel by liking the video and subscribing. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I read them all. And just so we're clear, parts of this story are dramatized for storytelling and learning purposes. Any resemblance to real people or places is coincidental, but the lesson behind it is very real. I stood there, the wind off Lake Michigan cutting through my wool coat, staring at the gray granite headstone. Catherine Caldwell, beloved wife and mother. It had been exactly 365 days since the stroke took her. 365 days of silence in a house that used to smell like vanilla and old paper. I felt the cold in my joints, the kind of ache that comes from 40 years of hauling lumber and pouring concrete foundations in Chicago winters. But the cold outside was nothing compared to the chill standing right behind me. My two sons, Brandon and Justin, were shifting their weight, checking their watches, and acting like they were waiting for a dentist appointment, rather than honoring the woman who gave them life. I could hear the tap-tap-tap of a finger on a smartphone screen. It was Brandon. At 45, he was a senior investment broker, or at least that is what he told everyone at the country club. He was wearing a suit that cost more than my first work truck, and his eyes were glued to a trading app. "Sell it now," he whispered, turning his back to his mother's grave. I said short, "The stock, do not argue with me, just dump it before the market closes." I clenched my jaw. We were at a memorial, and he was trading stocks. Beside him, Justin, my younger boy at 40, let out a loud, exaggerated sigh. He checked his gold Rolex, a gift I had given him when he took over the restaurant I bought for him, a restaurant that failed 18 months later. "Come on, Dad," Justin muttered, barely keeping his voice down. "It is 20 degrees out here. She is not going anywhere. We paid our respects, so let us wrap this up." I tightened my grip on the cane. I did not need the cane to walk, not really. I used it because it made people underestimate me. It made them think Harrison Caldwell was just a harmless old retiree, not the man who built half the commercial strip malls in this county. I turned slowly. My sons stopped talking, but their eyes were empty. They did not look like men grieving a mother. They looked like men waiting for an inheritance check to clear. That was when my phone buzzed in my breast pocket. I ignored it. It buzzed again. And a third time. Persistent. I pulled it out. It was Mike Kowalski. Mike was a good man, a solid contractor I had hired to remodel Catherine's old office in the downtown building. I had kept the building even after I sold the construction company Caldwell & Sons to Brandon and Justin 5 years ago. That building was my history. I wanted to turn Catherine's private office into a library for underprivileged kids. It was what she would have wanted. I answered the phone with a sharp tone. "Mike, I am at the cemetery. This had better be an emergency." The voice on the other end was breathless. I could hear the heavy thud of dust settling, the sound of a crowbar hitting concrete. "Mr. Caldwell," Mike stammered. "Listen to me. I just took down the east wall. The drywall. It was a false wall, sir. It was not on the original blueprints you gave me." I frowned. I built that office myself 30 years ago. There were no false walls. "What are you talking about, Mike?" "I am talking about a room, Mr. Caldwell. A hidden space. And you need to see this right now. I am coming over," I said, turning toward my car. "No," Mike shouted, his voice cracking. "Do not come alone. Bring them. Bring Brandon and Justin." Why, I asked, my suspicion rising. Because Mike lowered his voice to a harsh whisper. Because there is a note taped to a steel safe in here. It is in Mrs. Caldwell's handwriting. It says, "Do not open unless Harrison and both sons are present. Sir, you need to get down here before I call the cops." This looks heavy. The line went dead. I stood there for a moment, the phone cold against my ear. Catherine had secrets. My Catherine, who managed every invoice, every receipt, every payroll check for our company for 4 decades. She never hid a penny from me. I looked at my sons. They were already walking toward the parking lot, laughing about something Justin had seen on social media. "Boys," I barked. The tone was not the tired old man voice they were used to. It was the foreman voice. The voice that made subcontractors scramble on the job site. They stopped and turned, looking annoyed. "Get in the car. We are going to the old office." Brandon rolled his eyes. "Dad, we cannot. We have a tea time at Medina in an hour, and I have a client dinner tonight. We can visit the dusty old shrine another time." "It is not a request, Brandon. Mike found something. Your mother left something behind, and she specifically asked for you to." Justin laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound. "Mom has been gone a year, Dad. What could she possibly have left? A casserole recipe." "Get in the car," I said, stepping toward them. "Or I call Sarah Jenkins right now and we discuss the terms of the building's lease again." That shut them up. They technically owned the construction company, but I still owned the building their headquarters was in. I gave them a sweetheart deal on rent, practically free. If I pulled that lease, their overhead would skyrocket. They knew it. "Fine," Brandon snapped, adjusting his silk tie. "But let us take Justin's car. It is faster. And I am not sitting in your old pickup truck. It smells like sawdust." We piled into Justin's silver Mercedes S-Class. The leather was soft. The interior smelled of expensive cologne and something else which smelled like stress. I sat in the passenger seat. Brandon sat in the back, immediately back on his phone, typing furiously. I watched Justin drive. He was gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles were white. For a guy running a successful construction firm, he looked like he had not slept in a week. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the car's climate control. "Nice car," I said, watching the city skyline blur past. "Business must be booming." Justin nodded quickly, too quickly. "Yeah, Dad." "Great. Booming. We have a lot of projects in the pipeline. Big stuff. Government contracts." I shifted my legs, trying to find a comfortable spot. My knee hit the glove compartment, and the latch popped open. A stack of papers spilled out onto the floor mat. Justin lunged for them, taking one hand off the wheel. "I got it. Dad, do not touch it." But I was faster. I still had the reflexes of a man who had caught falling hammers. I grabbed the top envelope. It was not a contract. It was not a blueprint. It was a letter from the bank. The header was red. "Final notice of default." I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. I knew this bank. I had banked with them for 30 years. You did not get a final notice unless you were months behind, unless you had ignored the first 3 warning letters. I held the paper up. Justin's eyes darted from the road to the letter. His face went gray. "What is this?" "Justin," I asked, my voice low, "why is the bank threatening to repossess this car? I thought the company bought it outright." Justin swallowed hard. "It is just a clerical error, Dad. A system glitch. They credited the payment to the wrong account. I am sorting it out with the branch manager on Monday. Do not worry about it." He snatched the letter from my hand and stuffed it back into the compartment, slamming it shut. A system glitch. I looked at him. I looked at Brandon in the rearview mirror. Brandon was not looking at us. He was staring out the window, chewing his thumbnail, a habit he only had when he was lying. My gut started to twist. In construction, you develop a sense for when a structure is unsound. You cannot always see the rot inside the beams, but you can smell it. You can feel the floor give just a fraction of an inch when you step on it. Right now, sitting in this $80,000 car, I felt the floor giving way. Catherine had handled the books. She knew where every dollar went. If she left a note, if she hid something behind a wall, it was not a recipe. She knew something. And looking at my sons, one sweating over a bank letter, the other hiding his face, I began to suspect they knew it too. We pulled up to the curb in front of the Caldwell building. It was a sturdy brick structure I had bought in the '80s. The windows on the second floor were taped up for the renovation. Mike's white van was parked out front illegally, 2 wheels on the sidewalk. That was not like Mike. He was a stickler for rules. We got out. The wind whipped around us. I looked up at the window of what used to be Catherine's office. For a second, I thought I saw a shadow move. "Let us get this over with," Brandon muttered, buttoning his coat. "I have a conference call at 3. I did not answer. I walked to the front door, unlocked it, and pushed it open. The lobby was empty, the receptionist long gone. The air smelled of stale coffee and drywall dust. We took the stairs. The elevator had been out of order for weeks, another thing my sons promised to fix but had not. When we reached the second floor, the noise hit us. Not construction noise. Silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. The door to Catherine's office was propped open with a bucket. Mike Kowalski was standing in the middle of the room. He was a big man, 6'4", with hands like shovels. But he looked small right now. He was holding a crowbar in one hand, his knuckles white. His face was pale, covered in a fine layer of white dust. Behind him, the east wall, the wall where Catherine used to hang her degree, and our wedding photo, was gone. In its place was a dark, gaping hole, a cavity that should not have been there. Mike looked at me, then at Brandon, then at Justin. He did not say hello. He just pointed the crowbar toward the hole. "You better look for yourself, Mr. Caldwell," Mike said, his voice trembling. "And you boys, you better start praying." I stepped over the pile of shattered drywall and peered into the darkness. My eyes took a moment to adjust to the gloom, but my contractor instincts kicked in immediately. I knew the structural integrity of this building better than I knew the lines on my own palms. I had framed this place in 1982. I had supervised the pouring of every cubic yard of concrete. There should not have been a space here. Between the load-bearing column and the exterior brick facade, there was supposed to be nothing but insulation and a 12-inch gap for HVAC ducts. But as I leaned in closer, the beam of Mike's flashlight cut through the floating dust particles and illuminated a space that was at least 4 feet deep. It was a perfectly framed hidden closet. The craftsmanship was impeccable. I ran my hand along a stud. It was new lumber, or at least newer than the original skeleton of the building. Someone had come in here years after construction and modified the layout. They had done it quietly, and they had done it professionally. I looked at Mike. He was staring at his boots, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. "You did this," I said. It was not a question. Mike nodded slowly. 2 years ago, Mrs. Caldwell called me on a Sunday. She paid me triple to come in at night. She told me to build a false wall, and she made me swear on my mother's grave I would never speak of it to anyone, especially you. She said she was protecting the legacy. Protecting the legacy. The words hung in the stale air like smoke. Catherine was the most transparent person I knew. We shared everything. Or so I thought. I stepped fully into the cramped space. The air inside felt colder than the rest of the room. It smelled of old paper and steel. Sitting on the floor, bolted directly into the concrete subfloor, was a safe. It was not one of those digital keypads you buy at a big box store. This was an old-school Titan commercial-grade safe, the kind with a heavy mechanical dial and thick steel walls designed to survive an inferno. Next to it sat a gray fireproof filing cabinet. I felt Brandon and Justin crowd into the opening behind me, their expensive cologne mixed with the smell of gypsum dust. "What is this?" Brandon asked, his voice tight. "Why did Mom have a bunker in her office?" Justin let out a nervous laugh. Maybe she was a doomsday prepper. I ignored them. My eyes were fixed on a piece of cream-colored stationery taped to the front of the safe. I recognized the handwriting instantly. It was the same elegant script that had signed my birthday cards for 45 years. The note was brief. It read, "Open this only when Harrison, Brandon, and Justin are standing together." Brandon pushed past me, his shoulder bumping mine hard. He stared at the safe and his eyes widened. I saw a flicker of something dangerous in his face. It was greed, pure and raw, mixed with a desperate kind of hope. I knew that look. It was the look of a man drowning who just saw a life raft. "Mom was hiding cash," he whispered. "I knew it. She always said she kept a rainy day fund." He reached out and grabbed the handle of the safe, rattling it violently. "It is locked, obviously." "Dad, what is the combination? Do you know it?" I swatted his hand away. "Stop acting like a vulture," I snapped. "This is not a piggy bank." Justin leaned in over my shoulder. "Dad, if there is cash in there, we need to deposit it into the corporate account immediately. For tax purposes. You know how the IRS is about unreported assets." He was lying. I could hear the tremor in his voice. He did not care about taxes. He cared about that foreclosure letter I had seen in his car. They were both desperate for liquidity. I looked at the dial. Catherine had a mind for numbers, but she was sentimental about dates. I tried her birthday. Nothing. I tried our wedding anniversary. The dial spun freely, but the locking mechanism did not catch. Brandon was pacing in the small space, his breathing audible. "Try the business incorporation date," he suggested. "Or maybe Justin's birthday, since he was the baby." I shook my head. Catherine would not use something so obvious. I closed my eyes and thought about the woman I had married. She was practical, but she was also romantic in a private way. I remembered a rainy afternoon in April, a diner on the South Side. She was a waitress paying her way through accounting school, and I was a young framer with calloused hands and a dream. April 12th, 1974. The day we met. The day she spilled coffee on my work boots and laughed about it. I reached out and turned the dial. Left to 4, right to 1, left to 2, right to 7, left to 4. The mechanical tumblers clicked into place with a sound that felt loud in the silence. It was a heavy, satisfying, metallic clunk. I grabbed the steel handle and pulled. The heavy door swung open on well-oiled hinges. The smell of cold steel wafted out. We all leaned in. It was not a mountain of cash. On the bottom shelf sat 6 gold bars, kilogram bars. Even in the dim light, they gleamed with that unmistakable heavy luster. At current market prices, that was roughly $12,000, maybe a bit more. Significant money to some, but not a fortune that would save a failing company. But my eyes were drawn to the shelf above the gold. Sitting there alone was an old Sony digital voice recorder, the kind we used to use for site notes in the 90s. And next to it, a thick, expandable file folder. It was bulging with documents. A red label was stuck to the front cover. In Catherine's handwriting, it said, "Phoenix. Gold." Brandon shouted. He lunged forward, ignoring the papers entirely. He grabbed 2 of the bars, his hands shaking. I told you she was hoarding assets." Justin reached for the others, his eyes wide. "This is great, Dad. This buys us some time. We can liquidate this tomorrow." "Stop it!" I roared. My voice echoed in the small hollow space. "Put it down. This was not what she wanted you to see. The gold is a distraction." I reached into the safe and grabbed the file folder and the voice recorder. The folder was heavier than just paper. It felt dense. I pulled it to my chest, wrapping my arms around it. Brandon froze, holding the gold bars. He looked at the file in my arms, and for the first time he seemed to realize that the money was not the main event. He looked at the red label, Phoenix. His face went from flushed to chalk white in a second. Justin saw it too. He dropped one of the gold bars. It hit the concrete floor with a dull, heavy thud that made us all jump. Dad Brandon said, his voice dropping an octave. His charm was gone, replaced by a cold command. "Give me that file." "Why?" I asked, stepping back out of the hidden space into the main office. "Because it is company property," Brandon said, following me. His eyes were locked on the folder. "If Mom kept files on the business, they belong to the current owners. That is me and Justin. You sold the company, Dad. You have no legal right to those documents." I clutched the folder tighter. "This is not the company archives, Brandon. This was hidden in a secret wall in a safe only I could open. This is personal." "Personal my ass," Brandon snarled. He stepped closer, encroaching on my personal space. He was taller than me now, and younger, but he had never done a day of physical labor in his life. He was soft. I could see the panic in his eyes. He was terrified of what was in this folder. Mom was the CFO. Brandon continued, his voice rising. "If those are financial records, and we are audited, I need them. Hand it over, now." Justin moved to flank me. "Dad, come on. Do not be difficult. Brandon is right. We just want to make sure everything is compliant. We are protecting you. If Mom made mistakes in the books, we need to fix them before anyone finds out." Mistakes. Catherine did not make mistakes. She was a human calculator. If she hid this, she did it for a reason. And seeing the sweat breaking out on Brandon's upper lip, I knew that reason was not a clerical error. "I am taking this home," I said firmly. "I am going to read it. I am going to listen to this tape. And if it pertains to the business, I will let you know." I turned to walk away. Brandon grabbed my arm. His grip was hard, painful. He dug his fingers into my bicep. I said, "Give it to me, old man." The disrespect was like a slap in the face. He had never touched me in anger before. Greed had stripped away the veneer of civilization. I looked down at his hand on my arm, then up at his face. "Let go," I said quietly. "Or what?" Brandon sneered. "You are going to hit me with your cane. You are 73 years old. You are confused, and you are stealing company property." Justin grabbed the folder. Justin hesitated, looking between us. Brandon shouted at him, "Do it, Justin. If that file gets out, we are ruined. Do you understand?" Ruined. Justin lunged. But before he could reach me, a massive shape moved between us. It was Mike Kowalski. He stepped in front of me like a concrete barrier. He was holding the crowbar lazily in one hand, tapping it against his other palm. He did not raise it. He did not threaten with it. He just held it. He stood 6'4" and weighed 250 pounds of muscle built from lifting drywall and steel beams. "I would not do that, boys," Mike said. His voice was low and calm, the voice of a man who breaks up bar fights for fun. "Your daddy hired me to do a job, and the lady of the house left him a note. I think you should let him read his mail." Brandon released my arm and stepped back, breathing hard. He looked at Mike, then at the crowbar, then at me. He adjusted his suit jacket, trying to regain his dignity, but his hands were trembling. "You are making a mistake, Dad," Brandon spat. "A huge mistake. You do not know what you are dealing with. That file, it is complicated. You would not understand the modern financial instruments we use. You are going to misinterpret things and cause a panic. I understand enough, I said, feeling the weight of the Phoenix file in my arms. I understand that honest men do not sweat when they see a file folder. And I understand that you just tried to strong-arm your own father for a stack of papers. I looked at the gold bars still clutched in Brandon's hand. Keep the gold, I said, my voice flat. Take it. Split it between you. Consider it an early inheritance. I do not want it. I just want the truth. Brandon looked at the gold, then at me. He seemed torn between the immediate cash and the danger of the file. Greed won. It always does with him. He shoved the gold bars into his coat pockets, straining the fabric. Fine, he said. Take the papers. Read your little fairy tales. But if you show that to anyone outside the family without consulting us first, I will sue you for corporate espionage. I am serious, Dad. I will drag you into court so fast your head will spin. He turned and stormed out of the office. Justin lingered for a second, looking at the file with a gaze of pure terror. Dad, please, Justin whispered. Just burn it, for everyone's sake. Then he turned and ran after his brother. I stood there in the dust-filled office, my heart hammering against my ribs. I looked at Mike. Thank you, Mike. I will not forget that. Mike nodded, wiping dust from his forehead. Mrs. Caldwell was a good woman, sir. She helped my daughter with tuition when nobody else would. I owed her. And I figure whatever is in that stack of papers, she wanted you to see it bad enough to build a wall around it. I walked to the window and watched my sons get into the Mercedes. They were arguing. Brandon was shouting and hitting the steering wheel. I looked down at the file in my arms. Phoenix, a mythical bird that rises from the ashes. But to rise from the ashes, something first has to burn. And looking at the fear in my son's eyes, I had a terrible feeling that the burning was just beginning. I tucked the file under my coat, gripped the voice recorder, and walked toward the stairs. I needed to go home. I needed a drink. And I needed to hear what my dead wife had been trying to tell me for 2 years. I walked toward the stairwell, my boots heavy on the dusty floorboards, but before I could reach the landing, Brandon and Justin blocked my path. They had not left. They had regrouped. The rage that had contorted Brandon's face just moments ago in the office was gone, replaced by a mask of concern that I had seen him wear 1,000 times when he was trying to sell a bad stock to a widow. He held up his hands, palms open, in a gesture of surrender. Dad, wait, Brandon said, his voice dropping to a soothing, almost patronizing register. Please just stop for a second. I am sorry. I should not have yelled. Emotions are running high for all of us. It has been a hard year. He took a step closer, crowding me against the banister. Justin stood behind him, looking at his shoes, shifting nervously, like a kid called to the principal's office. Brandon continued, his tone dripping with fake empathy. Look, Dad. The reason I reacted that way is because I am worried about you. And I am worried about Mom's legacy. You did not know this because we did not want to burden you while you were grieving. But Mom was not herself those last few years. I tightened my grip on the file folder. What are you talking about, Brandon? She was paranoid, Dad, he said, shaking his head sadly. It started small, forgetting where she put her keys, thinking the mailman was spying on her. By the end, she was convinced the government was coming to seize everything. That is why she built that wall. That is why she bought that gold. It was not rational, Dad. It was sickness. She was hiding assets because she was scared of phantom enemies. He reached out a hand, not to grab this time, but to beckon. If the IRS finds out about that safe, about unreported gold and hidden files, they will tear her reputation apart. They will come after the estate. They will come after you. Give me the file, Dad. Let me take it to the company lawyers. We can self-report, we can fix her mistakes quietly. Let us protect her memory. Do not let her illness define her legacy. For a second, just a fraction of a second, I almost believed him. It was a good story. It was plausible. Catherine had been tired near the end. She had been stressed. But then I looked down at the folder in my arms. The red label Phoenix was staring back at me. I shifted the stack of papers and the cover slid open just an inch. That was when I saw it. Embossed on the corner of the top document was a logo. It was a palm tree and a stylized wave, and underneath it, in small crisp letters, it read, Cayman Islands Offshore Holdings Limited. My stomach turned over. Catherine was the daughter of a beat cop. She was a woman who balanced her checkbook to the penny every Friday night. She used to lecture me if I tried to claim a personal dinner as a business expense. There was no universe where Catherine Caldwell hid money in the Caymans because she was confused. She would only do that if she was forced, or if she was gathering evidence against someone who did. I looked at Brandon. He was sweating. A single bead of perspiration rolled down his temple despite the chill in the hallway. His eyes were not sad. They were terrified. He was not trying to protect his mother. He was trying to bury her testimony. You are lying, I said softly. Dad, please, Brandon sighed, stepping closer, his voice hardening just a little. You are not thinking clearly. You are 73. This is too much for you. Just hand it over before you make a mess of everything. I knew I could not physically fight them. Brandon was soft, but he was young and desperate. Justin was a follower, but he would do whatever his brother told him. If they decided to take the file by force, I would lose. I needed a distraction. I needed to speak the only language they truly understood. I remembered the gold bars. In the confusion of the office, I had managed to snag the canvas bag Mike had used to hold the bars when we first opened the safe. Brandon had dropped 2 in his panic, and I had swept them up along with the others while Mike held them back. It was heavy in my coat pocket, dragging down the wool. $12,000 of bullion. To me, it was just metal. To them, it was everything. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the canvas sack. The heavy clinking sound of gold hitting gold echoed in the stairwell. Brandon's eyes immediately dropped to my hand. The mask of concern slipped. You want to protect the legacy? I asked, my voice rising. You want the assets? Fine. You can have the assets. I swung the bag and threw it, not at them but past them. I hurled it over the banister into the open lobby below. It hit the marble floor with a deafening crash, and the bag split open. Gold bars scattered across the tiles, spinning and ringing like bells. There, I shouted, pointing down. Go get it. That is your inheritance. Keep it. Spend it. I do not care. I am keeping the paper, you keep the metal. The reaction was instinctual. Pavlovian. Brandon looked at the file, then at the gold below. $12,000 was right there for the taking. Justin did not even hesitate. He scrambled down the stairs, tripping over his own feet, his eyes fixed on the glimmering bars. Brandon wavered for a split second, torn between his fear of the file and his lust for the gold. But greed is a powerful gravity. You crazy old man, Brandon muttered, and then he turned and ran down the stairs after his brother. I did not wait. I moved toward the service exit at the back of the hallway. I heard them scrambling below, arguing over who grabbed which bar. It bought me maybe 30 seconds. I pushed through the heavy fire door and into the alleyway where Mike's van was idling. But as I stepped into the cold afternoon air, the door behind me flew open. Brandon had realized his mistake. He burst into the alley, his face twisted with fury. He had 2 gold bars clutched in one hand, but he was reaching for me with the other. Dad, stop, he screamed. You cannot leave with that. He lunged for me. I braced myself for the impact, but it never came. Mike Kowalski stepped out from the driver's side of the van. He moved with a speed that belied his size. He planted himself between me and my son, his chest like a brick wall. Brandon ran right into him and bounced off, stumbling back onto the wet pavement. Mike did not raise a hand. He just stood there, crossing his massive arms over his chest. His shadow fell over Brandon, swallowing him. "Mr. Caldwell hired me to clean out the office," Mike rumbled, his voice low and dangerous like gravel in a mixer. "He is the client. You are just the trespassing son. I suggest you stay down." Brandon scrambled up, his suit jacket torn at the elbow. He looked at Mike, then at me. He was panting, his face red. "This is not over, Dad," he spat. "You are stealing corporate documents. I will have the police at your house in an hour." "Call them," I said, climbing into the passenger seat of the van. "Tell them exactly what is in this file. I dare you." Brandon froze. He knew he could not call the police, not without exposing whatever was in the papers I held against my chest. He stood there, impotent and furious, clutching his gold bars as Mike slammed the van door shut. We peeled out of the alley, leaving my sons behind in the garbage-strewn backstreet. I watched them in the side mirror, shrinking into the distance. My heart was pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I felt sick. Not the sickness of illness, but the sickness of grief. I had just seen the true faces of the men I raised, and it was uglier than anything I could have imagined. Mike drove in silence for a few blocks, checking the rearview mirror constantly to make sure we were not being followed. When we hit the highway, he finally relaxed his grip on the wheel. "You okay, Mr. Caldwell?" Mike asked, glancing over at me. "No, Mike," I said, staring at the file folder. "I do not think I am." Mike reached into his shirt pocket. He pulled out a small envelope and handed it to me. "I almost forgot, sir. When I found the safe, there was something else taped to the bottom of it. Not on the front where the boys could see. Underneath. I pulled it off before they came in. Mrs. Caldwell's note said to give this to you only if things went bad." I took the envelope. It was small, the size of a thank you card. My hands were shaking as I tore it open. Inside was a single small silver key. It looked like a key to a diary or a jewelry box. "What is this?" I asked. "It is for the false bottom," Mike said. "The safe has a secondary compartment, under the floor of the main chamber. The boys did not see it. I did not open it. She said you are the only one who should look." I gripped the key tight, the metal biting into my palm. A secret within a secret. Catherine had planned this. She had choreographed this entire afternoon from beyond the grave because she knew exactly who our sons were. She knew they would go for the gold. She knew they would try to bully me, and she knew I would need an insurance policy. "Take me home, Mike," I said. "I have some reading to do." Mike nodded and merged onto the expressway. I looked out at the gray Chicago sky. The city looked different now, harder, colder. I sat there clutching the Phoenix file and the silver key, feeling the weight of 30 years of lies resting on my lap. I was about to find out just how much I did not know about my own life. And God help me, I was terrified. I unlocked the front door of my house and the silence rushed out to meet me like a physical wave. For 40 years, this house had been filled with noise, the sound of boys running down the hall, the sound of the television, the sound of Catherine cooking dinner while humming along to the radio. Now it was just a mausoleum of memories. I locked the deadbolt behind me and threw the sliding latch, a habit I had not felt the need for in this neighborhood for decades. But tonight, I felt exposed. I felt like the wolves were not just at the door, but circling the perimeter. I went straight to my study on the ground floor. It was a room lined with dark oak paneling, smelling of cedar and pipe tobacco, though I had quit smoking 10 years ago. I sat down at my heavy mahogany desk, the same desk where I had bid on the O'Hare expansion project, the same desk where I had signed the papers to sell the company to my sons. I placed the Sony voice recorder in the center of the green leather blotter. It looked small, harmless, a piece of plastic technology from a bygone era. Next to it, I placed the thick Phoenix file. My hands were shaking. I poured myself a glass of scotch from the decanter on the shelf, but I did not drink it. I needed a clear head. I sat there for a long time just staring at the recorder, terrified of what pressing that button would mean. It meant admitting that the life I thought I was living was a lie. It meant inviting the ghost of my wife into the room to tell me things I did not want to hear. Finally, I reached out and pressed play. The tape hissed for a moment, the sound of magnetic static filling the quiet room. Then came a sound that stopped my heart. A cough, a dry, weak cough, and then her voice. "Harrison, if you are hearing this, I am gone, and I am so sorry. I am sorry I left you alone with this mess. I am sorry I did not have the courage to tell you while I was still holding your hand." I closed my eyes. Hearing her voice was like a physical blow to the chest. She sounded tired, so incredibly tired. It was recorded 2 weeks before she died. I remembered those weeks. She had been withdrawn, claiming she had migraines, spending hours in her office with the door locked. I thought she was just slowing down. I did not know she was building a case. The recording continued, her voice gaining a little strength, a little of that steel I had loved so much. "You think the boys are doing well, Harrison. You think the company is struggling because of the market, because of interest rates. That is what they tell you at Sunday dinner. That is what Brandon puts in those glossy quarterly reports he prints out just for you. But it is a lie, Harrison. All of it." I leaned forward, staring at the spinning wheels of the cassette. "Before I press play on that recording, drop a stay in the comments, so I know you're still watching. And a quick heads up, the next section contains dramatized details for narrative clarity. If you'd prefer not to continue, feel free to exit the video here. They are not doing business. They are gambling. Literally gambling. Brandon started trading cryptocurrency 3 years ago using the company lines of credit. He lost $4 million in 6 months. And Justin is worse. He is betting on sports, but he is doing it through underground bookies. They have drained the operating capital. But that is not the worst part." There was a pause on the tape. I heard the sound of paper rustling. "They raided the pension fund, Harrison. The employee pension fund. The money for Mike Kowalski and Mrs. Higgins and the foreman who built this company with you, it is gone. They embezzled it to cover their margin calls. And when that wasn't enough, God, Harrison, I can barely say it. When that wasn't enough, they went to loan sharks. They borrowed money from people who break legs for a living, and they used the office building as collateral." My eyes snapped open. The office building. My building. The one I still owned personally. "They forged your signature, Harrison. I found the practice sheets in Brandon's desk. Pages and pages of them trying to get your loop just right. They notarized it with a stamp they stole from the company notary. The deed is compromised. If they default, those men will come for the building. They will come for everything." I stopped the tape. The silence that rushed back into the room was deafening. My hands were clenched into fists on the desk, tight enough to turn the knuckles white. Forgery. Embezzlement. These were not just bad business decisions. These were felonies. My sons were not just failures, they were criminals. And they had stolen from the men and women who had worked in the mud and the cold for 30 years to build Caldwell and Sons. I reached for the Phoenix file. I needed to see it. I needed to see the ink on the paper. I opened the cover. The first page was a summary written in Catherine's neat handwriting, listing dollar amounts and dates. The totals were staggering. $8 million siphoned out in 36 months. I flipped past the summary to the supporting documents. Catherine had been thorough. She had copies of bank transfers, emails, and contracts. I pulled out a stack of papers labeled renovation contracts. I spread them out on the desk, turning on the desk lamp to see the details. I had been a contractor for 40 years. I could read a bid sheet in my sleep. I knew what materials cost. I knew how long labor took. And looking at these contracts, I saw the fraud instantly. It was clumsy. It was arrogant. There was an invoice from a company called Redstone LLC for roof repairs on a warehouse in Cicero. $250,000 for a roof that I knew for a fact had been replaced 5 years ago under warranty. There was no breakdown of materials, no labor hours listed, just a flat fee. Round numbers. In construction, there are never round numbers. There is always tax, there is always a contingency fee, there are always cents. $250,000 even was a lie. I looked at another one. Blue Sky Inc. $300,000 for HVAC upgrades on a project that did not even have walls yet, according to the schedule. I pulled my laptop toward me and typed in the address listed for Redstone LLC. Google Maps brought up an image. It was not a construction yard. It was a UPS store in a strip mall in Indiana. A P.O. box. I typed in Blue Sky Inc. It mapped to a vacant lot behind a liquor store on the west side. Phantom subcontractors. The oldest trick in the book, but usually done for a few $1,000s here and there to pad a pocket. My sons were doing it on an industrial scale. They were writing checks to shell companies they controlled, cashing them and dumping the money into black holes of debt. I picked up the mortgage document Catherine had flagged. It was a lien against the downtown office building. The lender was not a bank. It was an LLC registered in Nevada called Janus Capital. I recognized the name, not from business but from the news. It was a front company linked to an organized crime syndicate operating out of Chicago. And there at the bottom of the page was my signature. Harrison J. Caldwell. It looked perfect. The slant of the H, the loop of the C. If I did not know better, I would have sworn I signed it. But the date was from 14 months ago. I checked my calendar on the wall. 14 months ago, I was in Florida for 2 weeks visiting my sister. I was not even in the state when this document was supposedly signed and notarized in Chicago. They had sold me out. They had sold my legacy, my reputation, and my financial future to criminals to cover their own gambling addictions. And the gold bars. The gold was just a distraction. Catherine knew they would see the gold and stop looking. She knew they were shallow. She knew they were greedy. She had bought the gold as bait to keep them away from the real poison, which was this file. I felt a wave of nausea. I pushed the papers away. I thought about the church this morning. Brandon checking stocks. Justin worrying about his car. They knew this house of cards was falling. That was why they were so desperate. They were not grieving their mother. They were terrified because she was the only one who had known where the bodies were buried, and now that she was gone, they were flying blind. I looked at the clock on the mantel. It was just past 11 at night. The house was dark except for the pool of light on my desk. I felt old, older than my 73 years. I felt the weight of every mistake I had made in raising them, every time I had bailed them out, every time I had signed a check to make a problem go away. I had created this. I had watered the weeds, and now they had choked out the garden. Suddenly the silence was shattered. The doorbell rang. It was a jarring, harsh sound in the quiet house. Ding-dong, ding-dong, rapid, urgent. Someone was leaning on the button. I froze. Who would be coming here at 11 o'clock at night? Had Brandon sent the police? Had the loan sharks come to collect on the building? I opened the drawer of my desk and put my hand on the cold metal of my revolver. It was an old service pistol I had kept for 40 years. I hoped I would never have to touch it again. I stood up, leaving the file and the tape on the desk. I walked down the hallway, the floorboards creaking under my boots. I did not turn on the hall lights. I moved through the shadows toward the front door. The doorbell rang again, insistent, desperate. I looked through the peephole. The porch light cast a yellow glow over the stoop. Standing there, shivering in a thin coat, was Megan, Brandon's wife, my daughter-in-law. Her mascara was running down her cheeks in black streaks. Her hair, usually perfectly coiffed, was a mess. She was hugging herself, rocking back and forth on her heels. She looked terrified. "Open the door! Harrison," she sobbed, her voice muffled by the heavy wood. "Please, you have to let me in. They are going to ruin us. Please, Dad." I stared at her through the glass. Megan was an actress. She had been a beauty queen in her 20s, and she knew how to use tears like a weapon. Was she here because she was genuinely afraid? Or was she here because Brandon had sent her? Was she the next phase of the con? I unlocked the deadbolt and opened the door, just a crack, keeping the chain on. The cold night air rushed in, biting at my face. "What do you want, Megan?" I asked, my voice hard. She looked up at me, her eyes wide and bloodshot. "Brandon is going crazy," she whispered. "He is tearing the house apart, looking for papers. He says you stole something. He says you are going to destroy the family. You have to give it back, Harrison. Whatever it is, just give it back before he does something stupid." I looked at her, really looked at her. I saw the fear, but I also saw the way her eyes darted past me, trying to see into the house. Trying to see if I was alone. Trying to see where I had put the file. She was not here to save me. She was here to find the leverage. "Go home, Megan," I said, starting to close the door. "No, wait," she screamed, jamming her foot in the gap. Her expensive heel scraped against the wood. "You do not understand. He is talking about Doctors Harrison. He is calling Dr. Evans. He is talking about having you committed. He says you are losing your mind." I stopped. Committed. So that was the play. If they could not get the file, they would discredit the man holding it. They would paint me as a senile old man hallucinating conspiracies. I looked Megan in the eye. "Tell Brandon I am not losing my mind," I said coldly. "Tell him I found it, and tell him he better have a good lawyer, because tomorrow I am not going to the doctor. I am going to the district attorney." I kicked her foot out of the doorframe and slammed it shut, throwing the deadbolt home. I heard her screaming on the other side, pounding on the wood, but I turned my back. I walked back to the study. I had a lot of reading to do, and I needed to be ready for war. I stood there with my hand on the deadbolt, listening to the muffled sobs coming from the other side of the heavy oak door. Megan was persistent, I would give her that. Most people would have given up after the door was slammed in their face, but my daughter-in-law had a unique talent for dramatic escalation. She pounded on the wood again, harder this time, and I knew that if I did not open it, she would likely scream loud enough to wake the neighbors. In this quiet subdivision where the loudest thing at night was usually a sprinkler system, a screaming woman on a front porch would bring the police in 5 minutes. And as much as I wanted Brandon arrested, I wanted it to happen on my terms, not because of a domestic disturbance call. I threw the latch and pulled the door open. Megan did not just walk in, she collapsed. She fell to her knees on the entryway rug, her expensive coat pooling around her like a dramatic pool of blood. She clutched at the hem of my trousers, her knuckles white and her face buried in the fabric. "Oh, Dad. Thank God," she wailed, her voice thick with performative grief. "You have to help him. You have to save us. Brandon is not himself. He is talking crazy. He says he is going to leave the country. He says his life is over. I looked down at her. The performance was impressive. If I did not know better, I might have felt a pang of sympathy. But I had seen Megan cry like this when the country club rejected her application, and when the barista got her order wrong. She was a woman who used emotion as a battering ram. "Get up, Megan," I said, my voice flat. "You are ruining your coat." She sniffled loudly and looked up, her mascara smeared artfully beneath her eyes. She slowly rose to her feet, brushing off her knees. She reached into her large tote bag and pulled out a plastic container. It was still warm. I could see the condensation on the lid. "I brought you this," she said, her voice trembling. "Chicken soup. I made it myself. I know how much you love homemade soup, and with everything happening, I thought you might forget to eat. You need to keep your strength up, Dad. For us." I stared at the container. Megan did not cook. In the 10 years she had been married to Brandon, I had never seen her boil water. Their kitchen was a showpiece of stainless steel and marble that was used exclusively for reheating takeout from high-end restaurants. The idea of Megan chopping carrots and simmering broth was about as likely as me taking up ballet. "Come in," I said, stepping aside. "But we are going to the kitchen, not the study." I wanted to keep her away from the Phoenix file, which was still sitting on my desk under the pool of lamplight. I led her down the hallway, but I noticed immediately that her eyes were not on me. They were darting around, scanning the shadows, looking for the one thing everyone seemed desperate to find tonight. We sat at the kitchen island. I put the soup container on the counter between us, but I did not open it. Megan sat on the edge of the stool, her posture rigid. She kept glancing toward the hallway, toward the open door of my study. "So Brandon is stressed," I said, leaning back and crossing my arms. "Stressed is not the word, Dad," she said, leaning forward. "He is having a breakdown. He keeps saying that you stole company property, that you have documents that could hurt a lot of innocent people." She reached out and touched my hand, her fingers cold. "Dad, if Mom left something behind, something that maybe she wrote when she was not thinking clearly, do you think it is fair to use that against your own son?" I pulled my hand away. Catherine was always thinking clearly, Megan. Until the very end, she was the sharpest person in the room. Megan sighed a long, shuddering breath. "I know you loved her, Dad. We all did. But the last few months, she was different. She told me things. What things, I asked. She told me she was worried about the government. She lied smoothly. She said she was moving money around to protect it from taxes. She said if anything happened to her, we should burn her files, to protect the family." I felt a cold anger rising in my gut. They were all singing from the same song sheet. Brandon must have coached her before sending her over. It was a coordinated attack on Catherine's memory, designed to make her look criminal so they could justify destroying the evidence. I looked at the soup. It sat there, innocent and warm. "Why did you really come here, Megan?" I asked. "Because Brandon sent you." "No," she protested, her eyes widening. "I came because I care about you. You are his father. You are grandpa too. Well, you would be a grandpa if we had kids." She let that hang in the air, a subtle reminder of the grandchildren. I did not have the legacy I was supposedly destroying. She pushed the soup toward me. "Please eat, Dad. It is a family recipe. It will make you feel better." I looked at the soup again. A memory scratched at the back of my mind. It was from about 18 months ago. Catherine had started getting sick. Not the stroke that killed her, but before that. She had spells of dizziness, nausea, and terrible stomach cramps. Doctors could not figure it out. They called it a sensitive stomach or stress. But I remembered something else. Catherine only got sick after Sunday dinners at Brandon and Megan's house. or after Megan brought over her special wellness smoothies. Catherine had complained about a metallic taste in her mouth. I had dismissed it as a side effect of her blood pressure medication. But now, looking at this woman who lied as easily as she breathed, looking at a container of soup she claimed to have made herself despite never cooking a day in her life, a chill went down my spine that had nothing to do with the drafty house. I felt a sudden need to be very careful. "You know what," I said, forcing a tired smile. "That actually smells good. But I need to wash up first. All that dust from the office." Megan smiled, and it was like the sun breaking through clouds. Her relief was palpable. "Of course, Dad. Go wash up. I will find a bowl and a spoon." I stood up and walked out of the kitchen. I went down the hall to the powder room. I closed the door and locked it. I turned on the faucet loud, letting the water run. Then I waited. I counted to 30. I pictured Megan in my kitchen. Was she putting something in the soup? Or was the soup already tainted? Or was the soup just a prop, a reason to get inside the house? I turned off the water. I did not wash my hands. I opened the door quietly. I took off my boots, leaving them by the bathroom door so I could move silently in my socks. I crept down the hallway, avoiding the floorboard that always squeaked. I peeked into the kitchen. It was empty. The soup container was still on the counter, unopened. Megan was gone. I moved toward the study. The door was ajar, just as I had left it. A slice of yellow light spilled out into the dark hallway. I approached the door slowly, my heart hammering against my ribs. I heard a soft sound. Click, a pause. Click. I peered around the doorframe. Megan was standing at my desk. She was not crying. She was not shaking. She was working with the efficiency of a corporate spy. She had the Phoenix file open. She was using her smartphone to take high-resolution photographs of every document. She would turn a page, let the camera focus, and snap the picture. Then she would turn the page again. Her face was illuminated by the glow of the phone screen. It was not the face of a worried daughter-in-law. It was the face of a predator. Her lips were moving silently, counting the pages. She had already photographed the bank transfer records. Now she was photographing the mortgage document with the forged signature. I watched her for a moment, feeling a mixture of validation and horror. My instincts were right. She was not here to feed me. She was here to steal the information Brandon needed to prepare his defense or to cover his tracks. She was gathering intelligence. I stepped back into the hallway. I needed to end this charade, but I needed to do it in a way that let her know I knew. I needed to fire a warning shot. I took a deep breath and let out a loud hacking cough, the kind of cough that rattles the windows. I stepped firmly into the doorway, flipping the light switch on the wall to full brightness. Megan jumped about a foot in the air. She nearly dropped her phone. She spun around, shoving the phone behind her back in a clumsy attempt to hide it. She looked like a deer caught in the headlights of a semi-truck. "Dad," she stammered, her voice pitching high. I was looking for a napkin. For the soup." I looked at her. I looked at the open file on my desk. I looked at the phone she was trying to shove into her pocket. In my study, I asked, my voice icy. "You were looking for a napkin in my private study on top of my desk, inside a confidential file." Megan opened her mouth to lie again, but the words died in her throat. She saw the look on my face. It was the look of a man who was done being played. I walked over to the desk. I closed the Phoenix file slowly, deliberately. I picked up the voice recorder and slipped it into my pocket. Then I turned to her. "Get out," I said. Megan blinked. "Dad, I can explain." "Get out," I repeated louder. "Get out of my house. Take your soup, take your lies. And tell your husband that if he sends you here again, I will add trespassing to the list of charges I am filing tomorrow." Megan stared at me for a second longer, trying to calculate if she could salvage the situation. She realized she could not. The mask of the concerned daughter crumbled completely, leaving behind a look of pure venom. "You are a bitter old man," she spat. "You are going to die alone in this big empty house, and you will deserve it." She marched past me, her heels clicking sharply on the hardwood. She did not go to the kitchen for her soup. She went straight to the front door. She yanked it open and slammed it behind her, the sound echoing through the house like a gunshot. I walked to the door and threw the deadbolt. Then I engaged the secondary lock. I went to the window and watched her get into her car. She sat there for a moment, typing furiously on her phone, probably sending the photos she had managed to take to Brandon. Then she sped away, tires squealing. I went back to the kitchen. The plastic container of soup sat on the counter. I looked at it with revulsion. I picked it up. It felt heavy, warm. I walked to the back door and opened it. There was a large decorative fern on the patio, a plant Catherine had loved. I hesitated. I did not want to kill the plant. Instead, I walked to the edge of the patio where the woods began and dumped the contents onto the ground. The soup was thick yellow and smelled overly pungent of herbs, maybe to mask a bitter taste. I threw the container in the trash outside. I went back inside and washed my hands, scrubbing them with hot water and soap until they were red. I felt dirty. I felt violated. My own home was no longer safe. I went back to the study. I sat down at the desk. My hands were steady now, steadied by a cold resolve. I reached for the phone and dialed a number I had not called in 5 years. It rang 3 times. Sarah Jenkins. "Sarah, it is Harrison Caldwell," I said. "Harrison. It is late. Is everything all right?" "No, Sarah. Everything is wrong. I need you to open a file. A big one." "What kind of file, Harrison?" I looked at the Phoenix folder. I looked at the empty spot on the wall where Catherine S.'s picture used to hang. "Litigation," I said. "I need to freeze the company assets. I need to file for an emergency injunction against my sons. And Sarah, I need a forensic accountant. Tonight." There was a pause on the line. Then Sarah's voice came back sharp and professional, the voice of a lawyer smelling blood. "Start talking, Harrison. I am grabbing a pen." I started talking. I told her everything. And as I spoke, I felt the old Harrison Caldwell, the man who built skyscrapers and weathered storms, coming back to life. My wife had left me a weapon, and I was finally ready to use it. I did not sleep that night. I spent the hours between midnight and dawn sitting in my armchair in the living room, watching the street through the sheer curtains. I had the Phoenix file and the tape recorder locked in the bottom drawer of my desk, but I knew that locks would not stop what was coming. I had built buildings that could withstand hurricanes, but I knew that the storm heading for my front door was made of something much more destructive than wind and rain. It was made of greed and the law. At 8:15 in the morning, 2 black SUVs pulled into my driveway. They parked aggressively, blocking my truck and cutting off any exit. I watched as Brandon and Justin got out of the first car. They were wearing fresh suits, but they looked haggard. Brandon was pacing, talking rapidly into his phone. Justin looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. Then the door of the second car opened. A man I did not recognize stepped out. He was not Sarah Jenkins. He was short, balding, and carried a briefcase that looked like it cost more than my first house. He had the predatory walk of a man who billed by the minute and enjoyed every second of it. I stood up. I did not go to the door to greet them. I went to the kitchen, poured a cup of cold coffee, and waited. I needed them to come to me. I needed them to think I was passive. The front door opened without a knock. They still had their keys. The sound of their footsteps on the hardwood floor was heavy, authoritative. They marched into the kitchen like a SWAT team. Brandon led the way, followed by the lawyer with Justin trailing behind, closing the door softly. "Dad," Brandon said, his voice tight. "We need to talk." I took a sip of the cold, bitter coffee. "Good morning to you too, son. Who is your friend?" The lawyer stepped forward, placing his briefcase on the kitchen island right where Megan had put her soup the night before. He did not offer his hand. "Mr. Caldwell, my name is Richard Sterling. I am representing your sons in a matter regarding your health and the future of the Caldwell estate." I looked at him. Sterling. The name sounded familiar. He was a corporate shark, known for hostile takeovers and nasty divorces. He was the kind of lawyer you hired when you wanted to burn the earth. "I have a lawyer," I said calmly. "Her name is Sarah Jenkins. If you want to talk, you can call her." Mr. Sterling smiled, a thin, humorless expression that did not reach his eyes. "We are not at that stage yet, Mr. Caldwell. We are hoping to resolve this as a family matter, private and dignified." He clicked the latches of his briefcase. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet kitchen. He pulled out a thick document stapled at the top. The title was in bold black letters: "Petition for Emergency Temporary Conservatorship." I looked at the words and felt a chill that went straight to my marrow. Conservatorship. It was the legal equivalent of being buried alive. It meant losing the right to sign checks, to drive a car, to make medical decisions. It meant becoming a child in the eyes of the law. "What is this?" I asked, pointing at the paper. "It is a solution," Dad, Brandon said, stepping up beside the lawyer. "A solution to a problem that has become too big to ignore." "And what problem is that?" I asked, my voice steady, though my heart was hammering against my ribs. "You, Dad," Brandon said. "You are the problem." Mr. Sterling cleared his throat. "Mr. Caldwell, your family is deeply concerned about your mental decline. In the last 24 hours, you have exhibited erratic and dangerous behavior. You assaulted your son at the office. You stole sensitive corporate documents that you do not have the clearance to possess. And last night..." He paused, looking at a note on his legal pad. "Last night, you were observed by your daughter-in-law engaging in paranoid delusions. You were seen talking to inanimate objects, specifically a voice recorder, believing you were communicating with your deceased wife. You accused family members of poisoning you. You destroyed food, claiming it was tainted. Megan. Of course, she had spun her failure into a weapon. She had taken the truth, my suspicions about the soup, my listening to the tape, and twisted it into a diagnosis." "This is ridiculous," I said. "I was listening to a tape Catherine left me, and I threw the soup out because it tasted like aluminum." "Paranoia," Mr. Sterling said, tapping the paper. "Classic symptom of early-onset dementia, aggravated by grief. We have a statement from a geriatric psychiatrist, Dr. Evans, who has reviewed the family's observations. He is prepared to testify that you represent an imminent danger to yourself and your estate." I looked at Brandon. He was not looking at me. He was looking at the granite countertop. "You are going to commit me?" I asked quietly. "Your own father." "We do not want to put you in a state facility, Dad," Brandon said, his voice trembling with fake emotion. "We found a place. Silver Lake. It is high-end. You would have your own room, a view of the garden, nurses around the clock. You can rest there. You can stop worrying about business, about money. We will handle everything." Silver Lake. I knew the place. It was a warehouse for the wealthy unwanted. A place where they medicated you until you were a zombie so you would not complain about the food. It was a prison with nice curtains. "And if I refuse?" I asked. Sterling leaned forward. "Then we file this petition with the court this afternoon." Given the evidence of violent behavior, the gold bars you threw, the threats, along with Dr. Evans' testimony, we will get an emergency order. The sheriff will come to escort you to a psychiatric hold for a 72-hour evaluation. And from there, well, it gets much harder to leave. The threat was clear. Sign the voluntary power of attorney giving them control, or they would use force. They would drag me out of my own house in handcuffs in front of the neighbors. They would strip me of my dignity before they stripped me of my assets. I looked at the document. It gave Brandon and Justin full control over all my accounts, my properties, my medical decisions. It was a total surrender. If I signed this, the Phoenix file would be burned before the ink was dry. The building would be sold. The debts would be paid. And I would rot in a room at Silver Lake wondering where I went wrong. I looked at Justin. He was standing by the fridge looking pale. He knew this was wrong. I could see it in his eyes. But he was weak. He was drowning in debt just like his brother, and he saw this paper as his only life jacket. I need a moment, I said. You do not have a moment, Dad, Brandon snapped. We need this signed now. The bank, the investors are waiting. We need to stabilize the company. I stood up slowly, leaning heavily on the counter. I let my hand tremble. It was not hard. I was shaking with rage, but I channeled it into a performance of frailty. I let my shoulders slump. I let my mouth hang open slightly. I became the old man they wanted to see. I cannot think, I stammered, my voice wavering. It is too much. Catherine would know what to do. Just sign it, Harrison Sterling said, pushing a gold pen toward me. It is for the best. I reached for the pen. My hand shook violently. I held it over the signature line. Brandon held his breath. I could see the greed vibrating off him. He was so close. One signature and he was free. One signature and he won. I dropped the pen. It clattered onto the document, leaving a small ink stain. I cannot, I whispered, sinking back onto the stool. Not like this. Not without making my peace. What are you talking about? Brandon demanded, picking up the pen and trying to shove it back into my hand. I need to confess, I said, looking up at him, my eyes wide and watery. I have sins, Brandon. Things I did in the war. Things I did in business. If I am going away, if I am losing my mind, I need to be clean before God. I need to talk to Father Mike at St. Mary's. Brandon groaned in frustration. Dad, we do not have time for a confession. You can talk to a priest at Silver Lake. No, I shouted, slamming my hand on the counter. The sudden burst of strength startled them. Not a stranger. My priest. I need 24 hours. Give me 1 day to set my soul right. Then I will sign. I will go wherever you want. Just give me 1 day. I looked at Justin. Justin, please. For Mom. Do not send me to hell with a heavy soul. Justin broke. He looked at Brandon. Come on, B, let him have a day. It is Dad. If we force him now, he might have a heart attack or something. Then we are really screwed. Brandon looked at the lawyer. Sterling checked his watch. 24 hours does not change the legal standing, he said, shrugging. And a voluntary signature is always stronger in court than a contested one. If he signs tomorrow, it is bulletproof. If we force him today, he could fight it later, claiming duress. Let him have his day. Brandon ground his teeth. He looked at me with pure hatred. Fine. 24 hours. Tomorrow at 9 a.m. we come back. And you sign. And then we pack your bags. Thank you, I whispered. Thank you, son. But Brandon held up a finger. But you are not staying here alone. I am not having you run off or destroy more documents. Justin stays. What Justin said, jumping. Why me? I have things to do, because I have to go manage the mess you made with the accounts, Brandon snapped. You stay here. You watch him. Make sure he does not leave the house. Make sure he does not make any calls. If he wants to pray, he can pray in the living room. I looked at Justin. He was a jailer I could work with. He was softer. He was guilty. That is fine, I said. I like Justin. He can stay. Brandon grabbed the unsigned document and the pen. He shoved them into his briefcase. Justin, lock the doors. Take his phone. Disconnect the landline. Nobody comes in, nobody goes out. I will be back tomorrow morning with the moving van. He turned to me one last time. Do not try anything, Dad. Dr. Evans is on speed dial. One wrong move and the men in white coats come early. I nodded, looking at the floor, defeated. I promise. Just let me pray. Brandon and Sterling marched out. I heard the front door open and close. I heard the lock click. Then I heard the sound of the SUVs pulling away. I was alone with Justin, my youngest son, my jailer. Justin walked over to the landline on the wall and pulled the cord out of the jack. He held out his hand. Your cell phone, Dad. I reached into my pocket and handed him my phone. He slipped it into his jacket. I am sorry. Dad, Justin mumbled, not meeting my eyes. It is just, we have to do this. You are not well. I am fine, Justin, I said softly. He walked into the living room and sat on the couch facing the hallway. He pulled out his own phone and started scrolling, probably checking the sports scores or his dwindling bank account. He was blocking the front door. He was blocking the stairs. I looked at the clock on the microwave. It was 9:30 in the morning. I had 23.5 hours before my life ended. I had to move, and I had to do it right under Justin's nose. I am going to my study, I said, to pray. Justin nodded without looking up. Just leave the door open, Dad. I need to see you. I walked into the study. I sat down at my desk. The Phoenix file was locked in the drawer, but that did not matter anymore. I had memorized enough. I needed a way out. I looked at the heavy steel safe Mike had brought over from the office. It was sitting in the corner, covered with a blanket. I had told Brandon it was just old tools. He had not checked. I reached into my pocket and felt the small silver key Mike had given me. The key to the false bottom. The key to Catherine's insurance policy. I glanced at the doorway. Justin was engrossed in his phone. I slid off my chair and crawled silently across the rug toward the safe. It was time to see what my wife had really left me. I sat on the floor of my study, my knees aching on the Persian rug, staring at the heavy steel safe Mike had lugged in from the office. Justin was just down the hall, comfortably ensconced on my leather sofa, likely watching sports highlights on his phone and waiting for the clock to run out on my life. He thought he was the warden, but he was just a lazy guard, and laziness was always the fatal flaw in any security system. I pulled the small silver key from my pocket. It was delicate, almost decorative, like something you would use for a diary. I ran my fingers along the bottom edge of the safe's interior, feeling for a seam. There it was, a hairline crack in the steel plating that was invisible to the naked eye. I inserted the key into a tiny pinhole I had missed the first time. It turned with a smooth, silent click. A false bottom plate popped up about an inch. I lifted it out, revealing a shallow compartment lined with black velvet. Sitting there, resting in the dark for who knows how long, was an iPad. It was an older model, the screen a bit dusty, but it was plugged into a portable battery pack that was still showing a faint green charge light. Catherine. She had thought of everything. She knew power could be cut. She knew time might pass. She had built a life raft that could survive a drought. I pressed the home button. The screen flared to life. There was no passcode, just a single app icon sitting alone on the black background. It was a generic security camera app, the kind you use for smart home monitoring. I tapped it. The screen split into a grid of 4 live video feeds. My heart hammered against my ribs as I recognized the rooms. The top left was Brandon's living room. The top right was his kitchen. The bottom 2 were Justin's apartment. I remembered then. 2 Christmases ago, Catherine had insisted on buying everyone top-of-the-line baby monitors and security systems. She said she wanted to be safe. She said she wanted to see the non-existent grandbabies if they ever arrived. Brandon had laughed, calling her overprotective, but he had let her pay for the installation. He did not know his mother was the one holding the master administrative key. I tapped on the feed for Brandon's kitchen. The image expanded to fill the screen. The video was crisp, high definition, with clear audio streaming through the iPad's speakers. I quickly muted the sound, terrified Justin would hear it, then turned it back up to a whisper, holding the tablet close to my ear. Brandon was there, pacing his marble floors. He was holding a tumbler of amber liquid, probably my scotch, and he had his phone pressed to his ear. He looked agitated, triumphant, but on edge. "Yeah, I know he is stalling," Brandon said, his voice tinny but distinct. "Stop worrying. He is broken." I saw his face. "He is going to sign tomorrow morning." He paused, listening to the person on the other end. It had to be Megan. "No, we are not sending him to Silver Lake." Brandon laughed, a cruel, ugly sound. "Are you kidding me? That place costs $10,000 a month. I am not wasting our inheritance on luxury sheets for a vegetable." I found a place in Gary. State-run. It smells like bleach and boiled cabbage, but it is secure. Once I have power of attorney, he goes there. Nobody will ever look for him. I felt a coldness spread through my chest that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. This was not just greed. This was hatred. He was planning to discard me like a bag of trash. "And hey, babe," Brandon continued, taking a swig of his drink. "You need to keep up with the supplements." "Yeah, the arsenic. Just a little. Dr. Evans says if he is disoriented when he signs, it is better. But do not kill him yet. We need him breathing until the house sells. If he dies before the transfer, the estate goes into probate, and creditors will swarm us. We need the cash first." I stared at the screen, my hand shaking so hard the image blurred. The soup, the stomach cramps Catherine had suffered, the metallic taste. They had been poisoning us, slowly, methodically weakening us so they could take over. They had killed my wife. Maybe not directly, maybe the stroke was natural, but they had weakened her body and broken her heart until she could not fight anymore. And now they were doing it to me. I looked at the iPad. This was it. This was the smoking gun, the confession, the proof of intent to commit murder and fraud. I needed to get this out of the house. I needed to get myself out of the house. I minimized the camera app and opened the email client. I typed a frantic message to the only person I could trust. Mike Kowalski. Subject code red. Message: I am trapped. Justin is guarding the doors. I have proof. They are poisoning me. I need out. Second floor master bath window, now. I hit send and watched the progress bar crawl across the screen. Sent. I slipped the iPad under my sweater, tucking it into the waistband of my trousers. I grabbed the Phoenix file from the drawer. It was bulky, but I buttoned my cardigan over it, hoping the loose fabric would hide the shape. I stood up and took a deep breath. I had to walk past the jailer. I stepped out of the study and into the hallway. Justin looked up from the couch. He had a bag of chips open on his lap, crumbs spilling onto the floor. "Where are you going?" he asked, his mouth full. "Upstairs," I said, keeping my voice raspy and weak. "I need to use the bathroom." and I want to lie down for a bit, before I pray. I am not feeling well. Justin scrutinized me. I let my shoulders slump. I leaned heavily on the doorframe. I looked like a man who was beaten. Make it quick, Justin grunted, turning back to his phone. And do not try anything, Dad. I took the knobs off the bedroom doors upstairs years ago, remember? You cannot lock yourself in. I remembered. Catherine had changed the hardware during a renovation. I just need to rest, son, I whispered. I walked up the stairs, slowly gripping the banister, like it was the only thing holding me upright. I counted the steps. 1, 2, 3. As soon as I reached the landing and turned the corner out of Justin's sight, I dropped the act. I moved fast. I went into the master bedroom and grabbed a few things. My wallet, my keys, a spare jacket. I went into the bathroom. It was at the back of the house, overlooking the garden and the alleyway behind it. I locked the bathroom door. It was the only door Justin had forgotten about. I turned on the shower full blast, creating a wall of white noise to cover any sounds I was about to make. I went to the window. It was a double-hung sash window, old and sticky with paint. I pushed up on the latch. It resisted. I gritted my teeth and pushed harder, using my legs for leverage. With a groan of protesting wood, it slid upward. The cold night air hit my face. I looked down. It was a 20-foot drop to the concrete patio below, a suicide jump for a man of 73. But then I saw it. Rising out of the darkness like a skeleton of steel was a construction scaffold. It was set up right against the back wall, reaching almost to the windowsill. Mike. I had forgotten. 2 weeks ago, I had mentioned to Mike that the gutters needed cleaning and the brickwork needed repointing. He had set the staging up, but we hadn't started the work because of the anniversary. He hadn't taken it down. It was still there, wrapped in safety netting, a metal ladder leading down to the ground. God bless you, Mike Kowalski, I whispered. I climbed onto the toilet seat, then swung one leg over the sill. The wind whipped at my clothes. I gripped the window frame. This was the moment. If I slipped, I broke a hip or worse. If Justin heard me, it was over. I swung my other leg out, finding the metal platform of the scaffold with my foot. It held. I transferred my weight. I was out. I grabbed the cold steel poles and began to descend. I moved methodically, hand over hand, foot over foot, just like I had done on 1,000 job sites in my youth. The muscle memory was still there, buried under the arthritis and the wrinkles. I was not a prisoner. I was a builder, and I knew how to navigate a structure. I reached the ground, my boots hitting the soft earth of the flower bed. I crouched low in the shadows. A figure stepped out from behind the large oak tree in the backyard. It was Mike. He was wearing black coveralls and holding a tire iron. He put a finger to his lips. He pointed toward the side gate, which was unlatched. We moved silently through the wet grass. Mike led me not to his van, which would be too conspicuous, but to a beat-up sedan parked down the block. It was his wife's car. Smart. They would be looking for the work van. I climbed into the passenger seat, my heart racing like a diesel engine. Mike got in and started the car. He did not turn on the headlights until we were 2 streets away. You got the email? Mike asked, his eyes scanning the mirrors. I patted the iPad under my sweater. I got everything, Mike. I got the whole damn war plan. Where to, Mr. Caldwell? Take me to Sarah Jenkins, I said. And step on it. We have a lot of work to do before the sun comes up. As we sped away, I looked back toward my house. The lights were still on. Justin was still sitting on that couch eating chips, watching a screen guarding an empty cage. He thought he had won. He thought the old man was upstairs washing away his sins. He had no idea that the old man was already gone and he was coming back with a wrecking ball. Sarah Jenkins' office was located on the 35th floor of a glass tower on Wacker Drive overlooking the Chicago River. It was the kind of place that smelled of mahogany leather and billable hours. I had not been here since I transferred the company deed to my sons 5 years ago, but Sarah had kept my file active. She was a pit bull in an Armani suit, a woman who had helped me navigate union disputes and zoning wars in the 90s. When Mike and I walked in at 3 in the morning, looking like fugitives, she did not blink. She just buzzed us into the conference room where a coffee machine was already gurgling and a young man with thick glasses was buried under a mountain of paper. "This is David," Sarah said, closing the door and locking it. "He is a forensic accountant I keep on retainer for cases that require a scalpel instead of a hammer. I woke him up an hour ago. He has been reviewing the scans Megan took photos of." David did not look up. He was typing furiously on a laptop that was connected to a secure server. He looked like a kid who should be playing video games, but when he spoke, his voice was dry and devoid of emotion, the voice of a man who saw the world in columns and rows. "Mr. Caldwell," David said, adjusting his glasses. "I have reviewed the Phoenix file documents you sent over via the secure link Sarah set up. I cross-referenced them with public records and the construction industry database. Your wife was meticulous. She did not just find the smoking gun, she found the bullets, the casing, and the receipt for the powder." "What is the damage?" I asked, sitting down heavily at the head of the table. David turned his laptop around. "It is not $8 million, sir. That was just the operating loss from the bad contracts. The total debt load, including the hidden leverage and the shadow loans, is $12 million. $12 million. The number sucked the air out of the room. It was an impossible amount. You could not lose $12 million just by being bad at business. You had to work at it. How I whispered. "It is not just gambling," David said, his fingers flying across the keyboard to pull up a complex diagram. "Brandon is not just a bad investor. He is a criminal facilitator. Those companies, Redstone LLC, Blue Sky Inc., they are not just fake contractors. They are intake valves. They are invoicing Caldwell & Sons for materials that never exist: high-grade copper wiring, industrial lumber, steel beams. The company pays the invoice. The shell company keeps a 10% fee and sends the rest of the cash to offshore accounts." He looked up at me, his eyes serious. "They are laundering money for a cross-state smuggling ring, Mr. Caldwell. They are moving stolen construction materials across state lines and using your company to clean the cash. That mortgage on your office building, that was not to pay debts. That was the buy-in. That was Brandon putting up collateral to the syndicate to get a bigger cut of the action." I felt cold. My company, the name Caldwell meant quality. It meant integrity. Now it meant a laundromat for thieves. "It gets worse," Sarah said, sliding a piece of paper across the table. We looked into the iPad, the one Catherine hid. We accessed the iCloud account associated with the device. It was synced to the family shared plan, but hidden in a subfolder. Catherine was tracking Megan's online activity. I looked at the paper. It was a printout of a digital receipt from a chemical supply website based in Mexico. The customer name was Jane Doe, but the credit card used belonged to a shell account linked to Megan's personal email. "Arsenic trioxide," Sarah said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Industrial grade, odorless, tasteless, and highly effective in small doses over a long period of time. She bought 3 shipments, one 18 months ago, one 6 months ago, and one last week. 18 months ago. That was when Catherine started getting sick. That was when the stomach cramps started, the dizziness. They killed her. They did not pull a trigger, but they poisoned her slowly, weakening her vessels, spiking her blood pressure until her brain finally gave out. And now they were doing it to me. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. I felt a rage so pure and white-hot it almost blinded me. I wanted to go back to that house and tear it down brick by brick with my bare hands. I wanted to hurt them the way they had hurt her. "We need to call the police," Mike said from the corner. He was still holding his tire iron like he expected a fight to break out in the conference room. "This is murder, or attempted murder." Sarah shook her head. "Not yet, Mike. The receipt proves she bought it. It does not prove she administered it. A good defense lawyer like Sterling would argue she bought it for rats or for a garden project. They would claim the video of Brandon talking about supplements was taken out of context. They would claim Harrison is senile and misinterpreted everything just like they planned." She stood up and walked over to me, placing a hand on my shoulder. "Harrison's is not a civil suit anymore. This is not about getting your company back. This is a RICO case. This is conspiracy, wire fraud, money laundering, and attempted murder. If we go to the police now with just this, they might get arrested, but they might also make bail. They might flee. And your assets would be tied up in evidence for a decade." "So what do we do?" I asked, turning to face her. "We need to catch them in the act," Sarah said, her eyes hard. "We need them to execute the crime. We need them to force you to sign that power of attorney while we are watching. We need to record them admitting to the poisoning in front of witnesses. We need a sting." I looked at Mike. I looked at David. I looked at the file on the table. "They want me to sign tomorrow morning," I said. "At the house?" "No," Sarah said. "Not at the house. It is too controlled, too many exits. And we cannot get a surveillance team in there without them noticing. We need a location you control, a place where we can set the stage." I thought about it. There was only one place, the place where this all started, the place where Catherine hid the truth. "The office," I said. "The old office downtown." Sarah nodded. "Perfect. It is isolated at night. We can wire it for sound and video within an hour. I can have a team from the district attorney's office there in plain clothes. I still have friends in the major crimes unit. But you have to get them there, Harrison. You have to make them believe you are breaking." I pulled my phone out of my pocket. It was the burner phone Mike had given me. My real phone was still in Justin's pocket back at the house. I knew Brandon's number by heart. I dialed. It rang 4 times. "Hello," Brandon answered, his voice groggy and irritated. "Who is this?" "It is Dad," I said, making my voice sound thin and trembling. "Dad," Brandon shouted. "Where are you? Justin said you disappeared. He said you jumped out a window." "Are you crazy? We are calling the police." "Do not call the police," I pleaded, letting a sob catch in my throat. "Please, son." I was scared. I climbed down the trellis. I just needed to get away. I went to St. Mary's, to the church. I needed to pray to your mother. There was a silence on the line. I could hear Brandon thinking, calculating. He was relieved I was not at the police station. "Okay, Dad," he said, his voice softening into that fake concern. "Okay. You are at the church. Stay there. I am coming to get you." "No," I said. "No. I am done praying. I have clarity now, Brandon. You were right. I am sick. I am confused. I listened to the tape again, and I think I imagined things. I think I am losing my grip." "Good, Dad," Brandon said soothingly. "That is the first step to getting better. Admitting it." "I want to end this," I said. "I want to sign. I want to go to Silver Lake. I am tired of fighting." "I will bring the papers to the church," Brandon said, eager now. "No, not the church," I said. "It is too public. And I do not want to do it in God's house. Meet me at the office, Mom's old office, where we found the safe. I want to sign it there, where she worked. It feels right, like saying goodbye to her and the business at the same time. Brandon hesitated. Why the office, Dad? It is a construction zone. Please, son, I begged. Just give me this one last thing. Meet me there in 2 hours. Bring Justin. Bring Megan. Bring the lawyer. I want everyone there so there are no questions later. I want to sign it all over. The company, the house, the accounts, everything. Just let me have this dignity. I could hear the greed override the caution in his brain. He saw the finish line. He saw the $12 million debt vanishing. He saw the control he had craved his whole life. Okay, Dad, Brandon said. 2 hours. The old office. Do not go anywhere else. Do not talk to anyone. I promise, I whispered. I will be waiting. I hung up the phone. The room was silent. Sarah was already texting her contact at the DA. David was packing up his laptop. Mike was checking his watch. You are a good liar, Mr. Caldwell, Mike said with a grim smile. I learned from the best, I said, standing up and buttoning my jacket. My son taught me everything I know about betrayal. Let us go, Sarah said, grabbing her briefcase. We have a stage to set. And Harrison, when they walk into that room, I need you to be weak. I need you to be the victim, until the moment the trap snaps shut. Do not worry, Sarah, I said, walking toward the door. I will be the old man they think I am, right up until I bury them. I sat behind Catherine's massive oak desk, the leather chair groaning softly as I shifted my weight. The office was dimly lit, illuminated only by the streetlights filtering through the taped-up windows and a single desk lamp that cast long shadows across the room. I had positioned myself carefully. Behind me was a large flat-screen monitor mounted on the wall, usually used for reviewing blueprints. But tonight, it was black, a sleeping giant waiting for my command. To my left, in the deepest shadows of the room, stood a tall ficus plant, and behind it, Mike Kowalski waited, holding his breath. To my right, behind a stack of drywall panels, 2 plainclothes detectives from the Major Crimes Unit were checking their service weapons. I heard them before I saw them. The heavy thud of the fire door opening down the hall, followed by the click-clack of Megan's heels and the confident stride of men who think they have already won. They were laughing. I heard the distinct pop of a cork and the fizz of carbonation. They were drinking champagne. They were celebrating my funeral before the body was even cold. The door to the office swung open. Brandon led the way. He looked like a new man compared to the desperate figure on the phone 2 hours ago. His suit was crisp, his hair perfect, and he carried a crystal flute of champagne in one hand. Justin followed, holding the bottle, his face flushed with alcohol and relief. Megan was next, looking like she was dressed for a funeral in a somber black dress, but her eyes were bright with greed. And bringing up the rear was Richard Sterling, the lawyer, clutching his briefcase like a weapon. Dad, Brandon said, stepping into the room. He scanned the dark corners, his eyes adjusting to the gloom. Why is it so dark in here? It is creepy. I kept my hands on the desk, palms flat. I slumped my shoulders slightly, letting my mouth hang open just a fraction. I needed to look like the broken man they believed I was. It feels right, I said, my voice raspy. This is where it started. With your mother. This is where it should end. Brandon walked over to the desk and placed his champagne glass on a coaster. He looked down at me with a mixture of pity and contempt. It is for the best, Dad. You know that, right? You are sick. You are confused. We are just doing what needs to be done to protect the family legacy. He nodded to Sterling. The lawyer stepped forward and opened his briefcase. He pulled out the document, the power of attorney, the conservatorship agreement, the death warrant for my freedom. He placed it on the desk in front of me, smoothing the paper with a manicured hand. Then he placed a heavy gold fountain pen on top of it. Sign right there, Harrison Sterling said, his voice smooth as oil. Next to the yellow tab. Once you sign, we will take care of everything. The debts, the confusion, the stress. It all goes away. I looked at the paper. I looked at the pen. My hand trembled as I reached for it. Justin stepped forward, refilling Brandon's glass. Cheers to new beginnings, he muttered, taking a swig from the bottle. Megan moved to my side. She reached into her tote bag and pulled out a thermos and a small paper cup. She poured water into the cup. I watched the liquid settle. Here, Dad, she said, her voice dripping with that fake sweetness I had come to loathe. You sound dry. Drink some water. It will help you focus. I looked at the water. I knew what was in it. Sarah's team had intercepted the digital receipt, but my gut told me Megan wouldn't miss a chance to make sure I was compliant. A little sedative, a little arsenic. Just enough to make sure I slept through the ride to the facility in Gary. I took the cup. My hand shook so badly, water sloshed over the rim onto my knuckles. Thank you, Megan, I whispered. You always take care of me. She smiled, and it was the smile of a shark. Always, Dad. Drink up, then sign. I brought the cup to my lips. I saw Brandon watching me intently. He wanted me to drink. He wanted me sedated. He wanted this over. I lowered the cup without drinking. Wait, I said. Brandon sighed an exasperated sound. What now, Dad? Just sign the damn paper. I need to know, I said, looking up at him, my eyes filling with tears. I need to know that you will take care of the house, that you won't sell it. That is where I lived with your mother. Brandon rolled his eyes, but he leaned down, placing his hands on the desk, getting right in my face. Of course, Dad. We are keeping the house. We are keeping everything. We are going to preserve the legacy. I promise. Now sign. Liar. I dropped the pen. It hit the desk with a sharp clatter. I slowly straightened my spine. I pulled my shoulders back. I closed my mouth and set my jaw. I looked Brandon dead in the eye, and the confusion vanished from my face, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. I do not think I will sign, I said, my voice strong and steady. The room went deadly silent. Brandon blinked, confused by the sudden change in my demeanor. What did you say? He whispered. I said I am not signing, I repeated. And I am not drinking your water, Megan. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a remote control. Brandon straightened up. What are you doing? I am showing you the legacy you really built, son. I pointed the remote at the wall behind me and pressed the power button. The large flat screen monitor flared to life. The brightness was blinding in the dim room. The video feed from the iPad filled the screen. It was high definition, crisp and clear. The audio boomed through the office speakers, echoing off the bare walls. It was Brandon standing in his kitchen holding a drink. No, we are not sending him to Silver Lake. Brandon's recorded voice sneered. Are you kidding me? That place costs $10,000 a month. I am not wasting our inheritance on luxury sheets for a vegetable. I found a place in Gary. State-run. It smells like bleach and boiled cabbage, but it is secure. In the office, the real Brandon froze. His face drained of color, turning a sickly shade of gray. He stared at the screen, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Then the video cut to Megan. She was on the phone, her voice clear and chilling. He is getting worse, she was saying. The soup worked. He was dizzy all afternoon. I am going to up the dose tomorrow. Just a little more arsenic. Dr. Evans says if his kidneys fail, it will look like natural causes given his age. We just need him to sign the papers first. In the office, Megan let out a strangled gasp. The paper cup of water slipped from her fingers. It hit the floor and exploded, splashing the poisoned liquid across her expensive shoes and onto the hem of her dress. She stumbled back, her hands flying to her mouth. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Oh my God." Justin dropped the champagne bottle. It shattered on the concrete floor, sending shards of glass and expensive foam everywhere. Sterling, the lawyer, looked at the screen, then at me, then at the door. He began to back away, slowly reaching for his briefcase. I stood up. I did not need the desk for support anymore. I towered over them, fueled by a rage that burned cleaner than any fire. "Bleach and boiled cabbage," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "That was your plan. That was your retirement package for the man who paid for your college, who bought your cars, who built this company." Brandon spun around, looking for the source of the video. "Where did you get that?" That is illegal. You bugged my house." "Mom bugged your house," I roared, slamming my hand on the desk. "Catherine knew. She knew what you were. She saw you coming a mile away." Brandon looked at me, his eyes wild. He realized the walls were closing in. He realized the $12 million debt was about to crush him. He looked at the power of attorney on the desk. It was his only way out. "Sign it," he screamed, lunging for me. "Sign the paper, old man, or I will kill you myself." He grabbed for my throat. But he never made it. From the shadows behind the ficus plant, Mike Kowalski stepped out. He moved with the speed of a linebacker. He caught Brandon by the back of his suit jacket and yanked him backward. Brandon flew across the room, crashing into a stack of drywall panels. Dust exploded into the air. Justin saw his brother fall, and panic took over. He grabbed the nearest thing to him, a heavy brass lamp from the corner table, and raised it over his head. He charged at me, a guttural scream tearing from his throat. "Police, drop the weapon!" The shout came from behind the drywall stack. The two plainclothes detectives emerged, their service weapons drawn and leveled at Justin. Justin froze, the lamp held high. He looked at the guns, then at me, then at the door. "Drop it now or we will shoot," the lead detective barked. The lamp fell from Justin's hands, crashing to the floor. He raised his hands slowly, tears streaming down his face. "Dad," he sobbed. "Dad, please." I did not mean it. Brandon made me do it. Just then, the sound of sirens cut through the night air. Blue and red lights began to flash against the taped-up windows, pulsing like a strobe light. Sarah had timed it perfectly. The cavalry had arrived. The door to the office burst open again. Uniformed officers poured in, filling the small space. Richard Sterling was the first to be cuffed. He did not fight. He just hung his head, knowing his career was over. Megan was next. She was screaming hysterically, kicking at the officers, claiming she was pregnant, claiming she was sick, claiming anything that might save her. Two officers hauled Brandon to his feet. He was bleeding from a cut on his forehead, where he had hit the drywall. He looked at me, his eyes full of hatred and confusion. "You are crazy," he spat, as they cuffed his hands behind his back. "You are senile. None of this will hold up. I will have you declared incompetent. I will take everything." I walked around the desk. I stood right in front of him, close enough to smell the champagne on his breath. I looked deep into his eyes, searching for the little boy I used to take fishing, the boy I used to carry on my shoulders. He was gone, consumed by greed. I leaned in close. "I am not crazy, Brandon," I said, my voice steady and cold. "And I did not lose my mind. I just lost my faith in you. And tonight I am taking back my name." The officers dragged him away. I watched them go. I watched my entire family being led out in handcuffs. Justin looked back at me one last time, his face a mask of regret, but I turned away. It was too late for regret. Sarah Jenkins walked into the room, stepping over the broken glass and the spilled water. She looked at the scene, the shattered bottle, the dropped pen, the files on the desk. "It is done, Harrison," she said softly. "The FBI is downstairs. They have the Phoenix file. They have the forensic accounting report. Your assets are frozen, but they are safe." I nodded. I felt exhausted. A deep, bone-weary tiredness that had nothing to do with age. "Did we get them all?" I asked. Sarah nodded. "The money laundering charges will stick. The attempted murder charges against Megan might be harder, but with the video and the receipt we have a strong case. And Sterling, he will flip on them to save his license. It is over, Harrison." I looked at the empty office. The false wall was gone, exposing the safe. The secrets were out. The rot had been cut away. Mike Kowalski walked over and put a heavy hand on my shoulder. "You okay, Mr. Caldwell?" I looked at him. This man who was not my blood, but who had stood by me when my own flesh and blood tried to destroy me. "I will be Mike," I said. "Eventually." I picked up the fountain pen from the desk. The gold pen Brandon had tried to force into my hand. I looked at it for a moment, then tossed it into the trash can. "Let us go home," I said. "I have a funeral to plan. Not for my wife, but for the father I used to be." The gavel came down with a sound that was final, like a coffin lid slamming shut. I sat in the back row of the federal courtroom, my hands resting on my cane, watching the men I had raised being led away in shackles. Brandon did not look at me. He kept his eyes fixed on the floor, his shoulders slumped in the orange jumpsuit that had replaced his Italian suits. 15 years. That was the sentence for money laundering, wire fraud, and conspiracy. The judge called him a predator in a white collar. He said Brandon had exploited the trust of his family and the financial system with equal disdain. There was no parole in the federal system. My son would be 60 years old when he saw freedom again. Justin got 8 years. His lawyer had argued for leniency, claiming he was manipulated by his older brother. The judge bought it partially, but complicity is still a crime. Justin looked back at me just before he disappeared through the side door. He was crying. Not the fake tears he used to get money out of me, but real terrified tears of a man who realized too late that loyalty to the wrong person is just a suicide pact. Megan's trial was separate and uglier. The forensic evidence from the iPad, combined with the chemical residue found in my plumbing, Sarah's team, had been thorough, painted a picture of a woman who treated murder like a household chore. She was charged with attempted aggravated assault and poisoning. She screamed when they took her away, cursing me, cursing Brandon, cursing the world. She lost everything: her freedom, her reputation, and most importantly, her rights as a mother. That was the hardest part. The wreckage they left behind was not just financial. It was human. In the weeks following the arrests, I spent my days in conference rooms with David and Sarah, dissecting the corpse of Caldwell and Sons. It was a painful autopsy. We traced every dollar, every fake contract, every stolen pension fund. The rot went deep. To pay back the creditors, the employees whose pensions had been stolen, and the tax liens, I had to make the hardest decision of my professional life. I dissolved the company. I stood in the equipment yard on a gray Tuesday morning and watched the auctioneer sell off the fleet. I watched the bulldozers, the cranes, the pickup trucks with the logo I had designed signed 40 years ago being driven away by strangers. I watched the tools, hammers, saws, levels being sold in bulk lots. 40 years of sweat, 40 years of building the skyline of Chicago dismantled in 6 hours. It felt like cutting off my own arm. But it was necessary. I used the proceeds to make the pension fund whole. I paid every subcontractor who had been stiffed by my sons. I settled the debts. By the time the dust settled, Caldwell and Sons was gone. The name that had meant integrity was now just a footnote in a court filing. But we saved the buildings. David proved that the mortgages on my home and the downtown office were fraudulent based on forged signatures. The banks released the liens, the loan sharks, seeing the federal heat and the dismantling of the syndicate by the FBI, backed off. I kept my home. I kept Catherine's office. 6 months after the sentencing, I drove to St. Mary's Cemetery. The winter had passed, and the spring grass was vibrant green. I walked up the hill to Catherine's grave. The wind was gentle today, not biting like it was the day this nightmare began. I knelt down and placed a thick file folder on the grass next to her headstone. It was the Phoenix file. I had stamped the front cover with a large red ink stamp, case closed. "I did it, Catherine," I whispered, touching the cold granite. "I cleaned the house. It cost us everything, but the foundation is solid again." I stood there for a long time, having a silent conversation with the woman who had saved me from beyond the grave. She had known I would be too soft. She had known I would need a push, a weapon, and a shield. She had given me all three. I heard footsteps behind me. Heavy, respectful steps crunching on the gravel path. I turned around. Mike Kowalski was standing there holding 2 fishing rods and a tackle box. He was wearing a clean flannel shirt, and his face looked less tired than it had in years. Beside him, holding Mike's hand, was a small boy. Christopher, my grandson. Brandon and Megan's son. They had kept him tucked away in boarding schools, and with nannies treating him like an accessory that didn't quite match their lifestyle. A quiet boy with big, sad eyes who had learned early on that being invisible was the safest way to survive in that house. When Megan was arrested and Brandon was sentenced, the state looked for next of kin. I stepped forward. Christopher was 7 years old. He looked at me with a mixture of curiosity and caution. He didn't really know me. To him, I was just the old man his parents complained about. "Grandpa Mike says we are going to catch a monster fish today," Christopher said, his voice small. I smiled. It felt genuine. It felt like the first real smile in a year. "Mike knows where the big ones hide, son," I said. "But you have to be patient." "Can you be patient?" Christopher nodded solemnly. "I can wait." I looked at Mike. The contractor had stayed by my side through the whole ordeal. He had testified. He had helped me clear out the warehouse. He had become the son I wished I had raised. "We ready, boss?" Mike asked. "I am not the boss anymore, Mike," I said, walking over to them. "I am just Harrison. But yes, we are ready." We walked toward the lake, the three of us. We were an odd family. An old man, a contractor, and a boy with no parents. But as we walked, I told Mike about the new plans. "I am not selling the office building, Mike," I said. Mike raised an eyebrow. "No. I thought you were done with construction." "I am done with commercial contracting," I said. "But Catherine wanted a library. I think we can do better than that. I want to turn the whole building into a community center, a trade school. We teach kids how to build, how to wire a house, how to plumb a sink. We give them skills they can own, skills nobody can take away from them." Mike stopped walking. He looked at me, a slow grin spreading across his face. "The Catherine Caldwell Center for Trades," he mused. "I like the sound of that. Who is going to run it?" I poked him in the chest with my cane. "You are. I need a project manager, someone who knows the building, someone honest." "Me," Mike laughed. "I am just a guy with a hammer, Harrison." "You are the guy who stood between to me and a thief," I said. "You are the guy who saved my life. You are the director, Mike. I will just be the grumpy chairman of the board who signs the checks." Mike looked at Christopher, then back at me. He nodded, his eyes shining. "I would be honored, Harrison." We reached the water's edge. I helped Christopher bait his hook, showing him how to tie the knot, just like my father had shown me. The sun was setting, casting a golden light over the water. It was peaceful. I thought about Brandon and Justin sitting in their concrete cells. I thought about the greed that had consumed them. They had wanted the gold without the work. They had wanted the harvest without planting the seeds.